The rhythmic clatter of the subway car lulled me into a state of half-consciousness. I was exhausted, more exhausted than usual, as if the weight of the world had finally settled on my chest and refused to move. The day had been brutal, the kind where every glance at the clock seemed to mock me with how much time remained. Somewhere between one stop and the next, my head drooped against the cold windowpane, and I slipped into a dreamless void. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was silence. The familiar screech of steel wheels on tracks, the muffled announcements, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights were all gone. In their place was an oppressive stillness that made my ears strain for any sound at all. I blinked blearily and glanced around the car. It was empty. Completely empty. I sat up straighter, the dull ache in my neck from sleeping against the window quickly forgotten. Through the windows of the subway car, I could see the platform of an unfamiliar station. There were no signs. No advertisements plastered on the walls, no maps of the transit system, no cheerful warnings to mind the gap. The tiles were dingy and cracked, and the single overhead light flickered irregularly, casting long shadows that seemed to shiver with the dim illumination. I fumbled for my phone. Dead. Of course, it was dead. I shoved it back into my pocket and leaned forward to peer out the window again. Beyond the platform, the station faded into darkness, a darkness that looked almost alive, shifting in ways that defied explanation. I couldn't see where the tracks ended, or if they even continued. I hesitated, my breath catching in my throat as I debated my next move. The train wasn't moving, and there was no indication it would. The idea of stepping onto the platform filled me with an unexplainable dread, but staying in the car felt equally wrong. With a shaky breath, I stood, the sound of my footsteps against the metal floor impossibly loud in the stillness. The doors slid open with a hiss before I even reached them, as if the station itself was inviting me in. I hesitated for a heartbeat before stepping out onto the platform. The air was colder here, carrying a faint metallic tang that set my teeth on edge. I glanced around again, hoping for some indication of where I was. Still nothing. "Hey," a voice called from somewhere down the platform, making me jump. I spun toward the sound and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was a man, his clothes rumpled and his expression wary. "You too, huh?" he asked, his voice a low rasp. He stepped closer, his eyes darting around nervously as if expecting something to lunge at him from the darkness. "You just woke up here?" "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What is this place?" He shook his head. "No idea. I've been here for hours. Or, maybe longer. I don't know. Time doesn't feel right here." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. "Are there others?" "Yeah," he said grimly. "Come on. I'll show you." I followed him down the platform, the flickering light above casting ominous shadows that seemed to stretch and twist as we walked. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a small cluster of people huddled together near a bench. They looked up as we approached, their faces pale and drawn. "Another one," a woman muttered, her voice hollow. "Great," someone else said, their tone heavy with sarcasm. "Another soul to add to the collection. What's going on here?" I asked, my voice rising with a mixture of fear and frustration. "Where are we?" "No one knows," the first man said. "We all woke up here, just like you. No memory of how we got here, no clue how to leave." I looked around at their faces, searching for any sign of reassurance, but all I saw was fear. It was contagious, sinking into my chest and spreading like ice. "How long have you all been here?" I asked. "Time doesn't work right here," the woman said. "It feels like days. Maybe weeks. But who knows? The trains never come. The darkness never ends. And the shadows," another person muttered. "You don't want to mess with the shadows." The others nodded grimly, their expressions darkening. I opened my mouth to ask what they meant, but before I could speak, a distant sound echoed through the station, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. The group stiffened, their eyes wide with terror. "Stay in the light," someone hissed. No matter what, stay in the light. The growl reverberated through the station, a deep, guttural sound that sent shivers up my spine. I glanced toward the others, hoping someone would offer an explanation, but their faces were pale, their fear etched into every line. Stay in the light, the woman repeated, her voice trembling. She gripped the edge of the bench as if it were an anchor, her knuckles turning white. What is that? I asked, my voice barely audible. The man who had first approached me, his name still unknown, gave me a sharp look. Don't ask questions you don't want the answers to. Another growl, closer this time. The shadows at the far end of the platform seemed to shift and roil, as though something massive was moving within them. The single flickering bulb above us felt absurdly inadequate against the encroaching darkness. I took a step back, my instinct screaming at me to retreat, though there was nowhere to go. The group huddled closer together, their collective terror tangible in the stale, metallic air. Do they ever come into the light? I asked, my throat tight. They, one of the others scoffed. There's only one, and it doesn't need to come into the light. It just waits. Watches. Don't antagonize it, the woman snapped. You'll make it worse. Before I could process what that meant, the light above us flickered again, longer this time. The platform plunged into darkness for a single, agonizing second before the bulb sputtered back to life. When it did, the shadows on the walls seemed closer. Damn it, the first man hissed. We have to move. Move? Move where? I asked, panic rising in my chest. There's nowhere to go. He gestured toward the far end of the platform, where the darkness swallowed the tracks. The other side. There's a maintenance tunnel. We can't stay here. You're insane, another person snapped. That's suicide. Staying here is suicide, he shot back. The light's failing. It always does. I stared at him, my mind racing. The idea of walking toward the source of the growl seemed unthinkable, but the light above us flickered again, this time for a full 2 seconds. The room went pitch black, and in that brief moment, I could swear I felt something cold and damp brush against my arm. When the light returned, the group was already moving. I stumbled after them, my legs feeling like lead. The shadows seemed to ripple as we passed, and every step closer to the darkness at the far end of the platform felt like a step into a grave. The growling had stopped, but the silence was somehow worse. It pressed against my ears, making every breath feel like a betrayal of the quiet. We reached the edge of the platform where the tracks disappeared into the black void. A rusted metal ladder bolted to the wall led down into the pit. The first man climbed down without hesitation, the others following in a single-file line. When my turn came, I hesitated. My hands shook as I gripped the freezing rungs, and I glanced back at the platform one last time. The light flickered again, plunging the station into darkness for a full 5 seconds. I heard someone above me scream, a blood-curdling sound that cut off abruptly. When the light returned, the platform was empty. Move, someone below me hissed. I scrambled down the ladder, my foot slipping on the final rung. I landed hard on the gravel floor below, my heart pounding as I struggled to catch my breath. The others were already huddled at the mouth of a narrow tunnel that disappeared into the wall. The first man motioned for me to follow as he ducked inside. The tunnel was cramped, the air damp and heavy. The walls seemed to close in as we moved deeper, and the faint light from the platform faded behind us. Someone handed me a small flashlight, a weak, flickering thing that barely illuminated more than a few feet ahead. What's the plan? I whispered, though I wasn't sure why. Speaking felt like an invitation to whatever was out there. There isn't one, the man muttered. Just keep moving. As we pressed forward, the growling returned, louder than before. It echoed off the walls, disorienting and all-encompassing. The flashlight beam danced erratically as my hands shook, casting fleeting glimpses of graffiti-covered walls and the occasional discarded tool. We came to a fork in the tunnel, and the group hesitated. The growling was closer now, coming from somewhere behind us. Left, the man said, his voice tight. Why left? Someone challenged. Because I said so, he snapped. The tension in the air was suffocating, but no one argued further. We turned left and hurried down the new passage, the walls narrowing even more. The flashlight flickered and dimmed, and I smacked it against my palm in desperation. Suddenly, the growl was directly behind us. I turned, catching only a glimpse of something impossibly large moving through the shadows, a shifting mass of limbs, or maybe tentacles, impossibly long and grotesque. The light blinked out completely, and the tunnel plunged into absolute darkness. Run, someone screamed. We bolted, blind and frantic, the sound of our footsteps echoing wildly. The growling turned into a deafening roar, and I felt the floor beneath me tremble as if the tunnel itself was alive. My foot caught on something, and I went sprawling, my flashlight skittering away. I reached for it desperately, but before my fingers could close around it, the beam flared briefly, illuminating the face of the man who had first spoken to me. His mouth was open in a silent scream, his eyes wide with terror. Then the darkness swallowed him whole. I lay frozen on the cold, damp ground, my breath caught in my throat. The flashlight beam had gone out completely, leaving me in utter darkness. I could still hear the others running ahead, their footsteps growing fainter, but I didn't dare move. Somewhere behind me, the creature stirred. The low growl was so close now, vibrating in my chest like a second heartbeat. The tunnel felt alive, the walls pressing inward, as if trying to force me toward whatever was lurking behind. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crawled forward, my hands scraping against the gritty floor. My fingers brushed the flashlight, and I grabbed it, clutching it tightly as if it were a lifeline. I clicked it on. Nothing. I smacked it against my palm, whispering a silent prayer, and it sputtered weakly to life. The dim glow barely reached a foot ahead of me, but it was enough to see the faint outline of the tunnel. The growl deepened, a guttural rumble that felt like it was coming from everywhere at once. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me, and stumbled forward. Keep moving, I muttered to myself. Don't look back. The tunnel seemed endless. My flashlight flickered as I ran, the weak beam bouncing off damp walls and jagged debris. Every now and then, I saw faint markings scrawled on the walls, arrows, strange symbols, words that had been smeared or scratched out. They were almost impossible to make out in the faint light, but they gave me hope. Someone else had been here. Maybe they had found a way out. Or maybe they hadn't. The growl came again, louder this time, and I pushed myself faster. My lungs burned with every breath, and my heart pounded in my ears. The tunnel curved sharply, and I nearly skidded into the wall as I rounded the corner. Up ahead, I saw a faint light. It wasn't the harsh, flickering light of the station or the weak beam of my flashlight. This was different, warmer, more natural, like sunlight filtering through leaves. I sprinted toward it, ignoring the sharp pain in my side. The growling faded slightly, and for the first time since waking in this nightmare, I felt a flicker of hope. The light led to a small chamber, its walls lined with what looked like ancient, crumbling bricks. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it sat a rusted metal box. The light seemed to emanate from the box itself, though there were no visible openings or bulbs. It pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. I hesitated at the threshold, my instinct screaming at me to stay away. But the growling was returning, louder and more insistent. I had no choice. I stepped into the chamber, the oppressive air of the tunnel lifting slightly as I approached the box. The markings on the walls here were more distinct. They looked older, carved deeply into the brick with precise lines. Some were runes or symbols I didn't recognize, but others were words, frantic warnings in languages both familiar and alien. Do not open. The light lies. It watches. I glanced back at the tunnel, my heart racing. The growl was growing closer, the sound echoing ominously. Whatever was in that box, it was my only chance. I reached out, my fingers trembling as they brushed the cold metal surface. As soon as I touched it, the room seemed to shift. The warm light intensified, blinding me for a moment. When my vision cleared, the markings on the walls were glowing faintly, their lines writhing like living things. A soft hum filled the air, drowning out the growl, and for a brief, fleeting moment, I felt safe. But then the lid of the box shifted. "No," I whispered, stepping back. I didn't. The lid lifted slowly, as if opened by an invisible hand. Inside was a single, black stone. It was smooth and glossy, absorbing the light around it rather than reflecting it. The hum grew louder, vibrating through my bones. I reached for the box instinctively, desperate to close it, but the stone began to rise, hovering just above the pedestal. The light dimmed, the chamber plunging into an eerie half-darkness. A voice whispered in my mind, not words, exactly, but impressions. Promises of escape. Power. Understanding. Behind me, the growl erupted into a deafening roar. I turned just in time to see the creature, a massive, shadowy form with shifting, grotesque limbs, lunging toward the chamber. Its eyes, if they were eyes, were voids within voids, staring straight at me. I grabbed the stone. The roar stopped. The creature froze mid-lunge, its form flickering like a distorted image on a broken screen. The chamber shuddered violently, the walls cracking and splitting as if the space itself was tearing apart. The stone was ice-cold in my hand, and I could feel it pulsing, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. The voice in my mind grew louder, more insistent. "Run." I didn't need to be told twice. Clutching the stone, I bolted back into the tunnel. The creature didn't follow. It remained frozen in the chamber, its form dissolving into the darkness as the light from the box faded completely. But the growl persisted. It wasn't coming from behind me anymore. It was ahead, echoing down the twisting passages like a cruel reminder. And as I ran, the stone whispered again. "You're not alone." The whispers didn't stop. They grew louder with every step, like an unseen companion murmuring secrets directly into my mind. Sometimes the voice was comforting, almost soothing. Other times, it was sharp and commanding, forcing me to move even when my body screamed for rest. The stone in my hand pulsed faintly, its coldness seeping into my skin. I glanced down at it, the glossy black surface seeming to drink in the faint light from my flickering flashlight. Its presence was both reassuring and deeply unsettling, as though it had become a part of me in the few short minutes since I'd picked it up. The tunnels shifted around me, the air thick and stifling. Every few feet, I passed cryptic markings scrawled on the walls, arrows pointing in different directions, strange symbols that seemed to twist when I looked at them for too long. I tried to follow the arrows, but they often led to dead ends, forcing me to double back. The growling was constant now, no longer distant but everywhere at once. It wasn't just the creature, I could feel the station itself alive around me. The walls seemed to breathe, the ground vibrating faintly beneath my feet. "Where are you taking me?" I whispered to the stone, though I wasn't sure why. The answer came instantly, the words forming in my mind like an unwanted memory. "Forward. To the others. To the truth. The truth." The word sent a chill through me. Did I even want to know the truth about this place? About the thing that was hunting us? I turned a corner and froze. Up ahead, huddled beneath a faintly glowing light, was the group I had been separated from. They looked ragged, their faces pale and haunted. Relief washed over me as I stumbled toward them. "You're alive," I breathed. The first man, the one who had led us into this nightmare, looked up sharply. His eyes landed on the stone in my hand, and his expression shifted from relief to horror. "What did you do?" he hissed, scrambling to his feet. "I didn't," I started, but he cut me off. "You took it," he said, backing away. "You touched the box. You don't know what you've done." The others stared at me, their faces a mix of fear and anger. I tightened my grip on the stone, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. "It was the only way," I said defensively. "The creature, it stopped. I think this thing can help us." "You think?" the woman snapped. "You have no idea what you're holding." "It's alive," another man muttered, his voice shaking. "I can feel it from here." Before I could respond, the tunnel trembled violently, a deep rumble reverberating through the walls. The growling rose to a deafening roar, and the light above us flickered dangerously. "It's coming," someone whispered. The group scattered, panic taking over. I clutched the stone and turned to run, but the voice in my head stopped me cold. "Stay. Face it." "No," I whispered, my heart hammering in my chest. "I can't." "You must." The ground beneath me cracked, jagged fissures spreading out in every direction. Shadows poured from the cracks, pooling like liquid at my feet. The others screamed, their voices fading as the darkness swallowed them. And then it appeared. The creature emerged from the shadows, its massive form folding and unfolding like a nightmare brought to life. Its limbs were impossibly long, its movements jerky and unnatural. Its eyes, or what passed for eyes, were fixed on me, and for a moment, I felt utterly exposed, like it could see every thought, every fear, every failure. The stone pulsed violently, the whispers reaching a crescendo. "Command it." "What?" I gasped. "Command it," the voice repeated. "It is bound to the stone." The creature lunged, and instinct took over. I thrust the stone forward, the whispers spilling from my lips in a language I didn't recognize. The effect was immediate. The creature froze mid-lunge, its body twisting as if in pain. The shadows around it writhed, retreating slightly. I stared in shock. The stone's power was real. I could feel it coursing through me, connecting me to the creature in some dark, inexplicable way. "Stop," I said, my voice trembling. The words weren't mine, they belonged to the whispers, but the creature obeyed. It lowered its limbs, its form shrinking slightly, almost submissive. The others emerged cautiously from the shadows, their expressions a mix of awe and fear. "What is it doing?" someone asked. "It's listening," I said, though I didn't fully understand it myself. The tunnel trembled again, the walls cracking and splitting. The station was coming apart, its very foundation unraveling. I could feel the stone's pulse sinking with my own heartbeat, faster and faster. The whispers became clearer, sharper. "The station hungers. Feed it, or be consumed." "What does that mean?" I shouted. The answer came in the form of a sudden, horrifying realization. The markings on the walls, the cryptic warnings, they weren't left by survivors. They were left by those who had tried to escape and failed. The station wasn't just alive. It was starving. And the only way to escape was to satisfy its hunger. The whispers were relentless now, filling my mind with fragmented thoughts and half-formed commands. My grip on the stone tightened as the realization settled over me like a shroud. The station demanded a sacrifice. It always had. The others stood around me, their faces pale and haunted in the dim light. No one spoke. The air was thick with unspoken fear, and I could feel their eyes shifting toward the stone in my hand. "What happens if we don't feed it?" someone finally asked, their voice barely above a whisper. The answer came not from the group, but from the stone. "Then it takes what it wants." The words echoed in my mind, cold and final. I glanced around at the others, their expressions reflecting the same grim understanding. The station would not let us go without payment, and the cost was steep. What does it want?" the woman from before asked, her voice trembling. The stone pulsed in my hand, its whispers sharp and insistent. Images flickered through my mind, flashes of blood, screaming faces, and endless darkness. It didn't want something. It wanted someone. "It wants us," I said, my throat dry. The group erupted into chaos. Arguments broke out, accusations flying as everyone scrambled to distance themselves from the inevitable choice. I stepped back, the stone in my hand growing colder with every passing second. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the din. "Fighting isn't going to help. We need to figure out a way to beat this." "How?" one man snapped. "You saw what happened to the others. There's no beating it. There's no escaping it. There has to be a way," I insisted, though the doubt in my voice was impossible to hide. The stone's whispers grew louder, more urgent. The creature was still there, lurking in the shadows, its massive form shifting uneasily as if waiting for its master's command. I could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on my chest, a reminder of the power I held, and the price of wielding it. "You're the one with the stone," the woman said, her eyes narrowing. "You've got the power. Why don't you decide?" The others murmured in agreement, their fear turning to resentment. They were looking at me now, not as an ally, but as a threat. "I didn't ask for this," I said, taking a step back. "No one asked for this," another man shouted. "But here we are. So, what are you going to do?" The tunnel trembled violently, the ground beneath us splitting open in jagged cracks. The growling returned, louder and more insistent, echoing through the labyrinth like a death knell. The stone pulsed again, and the whispers sharpened into a single, undeniable command. "Choose." I froze, the weight of the command pressing down on me. My mind raced, searching for a way out, but the stone offered no answers, only the chilling certainty that someone wouldn't leave this place alive. The others began to back away, their fear turning to desperation. They looked at me like I was the monster, and maybe I was. The stone's power coursed through me, and for a brief, terrifying moment, I felt a flicker of something dark and primal, something that wanted to give in. I turned to the creature, its massive form crouched in the shadows, waiting. I could feel its hunger, its impatience. It didn't care who was chosen, only that it was fed. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "There has to be another way." The stone's pulse faltered, and the whispers faded slightly, replaced by a deep, echoing silence. The others stared at me, their expressions unreadable. Then the woman stepped forward. "If it's going to be anyone," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes, "it should be me." "What?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You heard the stone," she said. "It wants a sacrifice. If it'll save the rest of you, then I'll do it." The group fell silent, her words hanging heavy in the air. I wanted to argue, to tell her there had to be another way, but the stone pulsed in my hand, its whispers returning with a soft, almost approving tone. I looked at her, the weight of the decision threatening to crush me. "You don't have to do this," I said, though I knew it was a lie. "Yes, I do," she said, stepping closer to the creature. "It's the only way." The creature stirred, its massive form shifting as she approached. I could feel its hunger intensify, a cold, all-consuming need that made my stomach churn. "Wait!" I called, but it was too late. The stone flared brightly in my hand, the light blinding. The whispers rose to a deafening roar, drowning out everything else. When the light faded, the woman was gone. The creature had vanished, too, leaving behind only the oppressive silence of the tunnels. The others stared at the empty space where she had stood, their expressions a mix of relief and horror. The stone's whispers returned, soft and satisfied. "The station is sated. For now." But deep down, I knew the truth. The hunger would return. It always did. The silence was deafening. We stood in the dimly lit tunnel, staring at the space where the woman had been moments before. Her sacrifice in the air like a heavy shroud, suffocating us in its weight. The creature was gone, but so was she, and the faint light from my flashlight revealed nothing but an empty corridor stretching into the unknown. The stone in my hand pulsed faintly, its whispers quieter now but no less sinister. I wanted to throw it away, to be rid of its cold touch and the insidious voice that had burrowed into my mind. But even as I thought it, the whispers turned sharp, commanding. "You need me." "What now?" one of the others asked, their voice shaking. I didn't answer right away. I didn't have an answer. My thoughts were a storm of fear, guilt, and anger, swirling around the growing realization that we were far from safe. The stone might have sated the station's hunger, but for how long? "We keep moving," I said finally. My voice sounded hollow, even to me. The others hesitated, their eyes shifting to the stone in my hand. They didn't trust me, not anymore. Maybe they were right not to. I couldn't shake the feeling that the stone was changing me, twisting me into something I didn't recognize. "Do we even know where we're going?" someone muttered. I didn't, but I didn't say that aloud. Instead, I turned and started walking, the faint glow of the flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. The others followed reluctantly, their footsteps echoing in the narrow tunnel. The labyrinth seemed endless, its passages winding and twisting in ways that defied logic. At every turn, I felt the stone's presence growing stronger, its whispers more insistent. The walls were changing, too. The graffiti and symbols were no longer faint scrawls but vivid, glowing lines that pulsed in time with the stone's rhythm. "It's alive," one of the others said, their voice trembling. "The whole station, it's alive." They weren't wrong. I could feel it now, the faint, rhythmic tremor beneath my feet, like the heartbeat of some massive, unseen entity. The walls seemed to breathe, their surfaces shifting and warping as we passed. The whispers in my mind grew louder, more coherent. They weren't just words anymore. They were images, memories that weren't mine. I saw flashes of other people, other groups wandering these tunnels. I saw their fear, their desperation, their futile attempts to escape. And I saw what happened when they failed. "The station doesn't let anyone go," I said aloud, the words spilling from my lips before I could stop them. "What do you mean?" someone asked, their voice sharp with panic. "It's not just a place," I said. It's a thing. It's feeding on us." "Feeding on us?" "On our fear," I said, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. "On our pain. That's why it's keeping us here. That's why it won't let us leave." The group fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. "What about the stone?" the first man asked. "What does it want?" I didn't know how to answer. The stone's whispers had grown eerily quiet, as if it were waiting, watching. I could feel its presence in my mind, probing at my thoughts, twisting them. It wanted something, but it wasn't ready to tell me what. The tunnel trembled again, the walls groaning as if alive. The faint light from my flashlight flickered, and I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. "What is it?" someone whispered. Ahead of us, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber. The walls were covered in glowing markings, their light casting eerie shadows that danced across the uneven floor. In the center of the chamber was a gaping pit, its edges jagged and uneven. The stone pulsed violently in my hand, the whispers rising to a deafening roar. "The end is near." I stepped closer to the pit, the others following reluctantly. The air grew colder, heavier, and the whispers in my mind became a cacophony of voices, each one vying for control. "What is this place?" someone asked, their voice trembling. "It's the heart," I said, though I didn't know how I knew. "The heart of the station." The pit seemed to pulse, its edges rippling like water. Shadows swirled within its depths, forming shapes that were almost human but not quite. The stone in my hand flared brightly, its light illuminating the chamber. The others backed away, their fear palpable. "What do we do?" someone asked. The answer came from the stone, its whispers sharp and undeniable. "One more. The station must feed one more." "No," I said, shaking my head. "I won't do it." "You must." The stone's power surged, and I felt my body move on its own, my feet carrying me closer to the pit. The others shouted, their voices distant and muffled, but I couldn't stop. The stone was in control now, its will overpowering my own. "Wait," someone shouted, their voice cutting through the haze. I turned, my eyes locking onto the group. They were staring at me, their fear replaced by something darker. "You did this," the first man said, his voice cold and accusing. "You brought us here. You have the stone. You're the one it wants." "No," I said, stepping back. "I didn't." "You have the power," the woman said. "You're the one it's been talking to. You're the one it's controlling." The group advanced, their fear turning to anger. I backed toward the pit, my heart pounding. The stone pulsed violently, its whispers screaming in my mind. Choose, or be chosen. The walls trembled, the pit roiling with shadows. I could feel the station's hunger, its insatiable need for pain, for fear. The group was closing in, their eyes wild with desperation. And in that moment, I made my choice. I raised the stone, its light flaring brighter than ever before, and spoke the words the whispers had been waiting for. The last thing I saw was the group's terrified faces as the pit consumed us all.